From about the middle of March until whenever the Yankee season ends, I spend more time with my next guest than I do my family. Jack Curry, welcome back to WDHA.
Jim, that's quite an introduction. I hope I get dressed up nicely and everything for you. I hope the tie is nice and neat, and I hope the pocket square looks good. I hope I'm being representative.
And of course, Jack covers the Yankees. He does pre and post game shows on the Yes Network and has a brand new book out, The 1998 Yankees, the inside story of the greatest baseball team ever. Jack, let me ask you a question that you posed early in the book. Before you started writing this book, what was your overwhelming memory of that team?
Oh, I go back to the clubhouse in San Diego, Jim, after they won the World Series, and just how happy and relieved that team was. Because when you win 114 regular season games, that's a mighty accomplishment. But you don't want to be remembered as the team that won 114 and then didn't win a World Series. So the San Diego clubhouse was really compact, so it was sweaty and sticky, and guys were spraying champagne everywhere. And I just remember that mixture of happiness and relief that they finally won.
After writing the book, what would you say your overwhelming memory of that team is?
How much camaraderie existed between that team. I knew these players were close. I knew that they cared deeply about each other. But in reviewing it 25 years later, you probably get players to be a little more wistful as they go back and talk about their experiences. And then also, Jim, just how obsessed they were with dominating teams. I wrote a book with Derek Jeter, and there were times where I had to pull stuff out of him. I interviewed him for this book. Right off the bat, he said, we wanted to pummel teams. We wanted to beat you every inning. And you and I have both spent a lot of time around baseball. I've never had another player say to me, we wanted to beat you every inning. He didn't just mean one game. He meant they wanted to win every inning all season long, and that resonated with me.
That's such a key part of the game, and I'm not sure how many fans realize that. The goal to win each inning, not just each game.
Yes.
Go win the inning, win the inning, win the inning. And of course, if you win enough innings, you start winning enough baseball games.
100%. And when Jeter said that, it made a lot of sense. And that team had that sort of dominant approach. Tino Martinez told me a great story about it was the only team I've ever been on where I didn't see people lounging on the clubhouse couches. Everybody was working. So if you wanted to be the guy to read a magazine on the couch, Bernie Williams was doing this, Paul O'Neill was doing that, Cone was doing this. So you better find something to do. You better go take some swings in the cage or something.
You know, you just mentioned a number of the key players from that team. And of course, there's the core four. But with any championship team, it's always the role players who have such a big part of it. You know, and I'm going through the list of guys who are on that team. I forgot Willie Banks was on that team.
Yes.
Dale Svuem, I forgot he was on that team. You've got Mike Buddy, and then Luis Sojo. Jack, I always felt that Luis Sojo had possibly the worst major league swing I have ever seen, and yet think of how much he contributed to that team.
Worst major league swing ever. That's you saying that, because if Louis sees this, I don't want him to pin that on me. But I was going to say, yet has 4 World Series rings, was a tutor to Jeter defensively, made Jeter a better shortstop. You mentioned Dale Svuem, and Jim, he also might have a record in the major leagues in being a guy who was designated for assignment, but then hung around to be a bullpen catcher and a batting practice pitcher. And when I asked him why he did that, he said, I knew how special his team was. He said, if we were in last place, I would have just headed home. I was getting paid. My contract was guaranteed. But he wanted to experience what he felt the 98 Yankees were.
And to go back to Louis for just a second, it may have been an ugly swing, but he got base hits. He put the ball into play.
Put the ball in play. Exactly. He made contact. So however ugly or non-mechanical or non-textbook it was, it worked for him.
Jack Curry, my guest this morning here at 105.5 WDHA. The brand new book coming out in early May, The 1998 Yankees, the inside story of the greatest baseball team ever. I mentioned role players. The other thing that struck me, Jack, as I went through that lineup, the roster of guys who were on the 98 team, how many of them were on the 18th hole of their career?
That's a great point. Tim Raines, Chili Davis, Darryl Strawberry. Who am I forgetting? There's probably other guys. It's a couple of the relievers. But role players, Jim, don't forget 3 guys that stand out for me. Because I think if you're going to have an extraordinary team, you have to have players who did more than you ever expected. And it's Shane Spencer, El Duque, and Brocious. Because if you asked the Yankees in spring training who those guys would be, Spencer was a career minor leaguer. Brocious had just hit 200 in Oakland. And El Duque was a mystery. They were excited about El Duque, but did they think in that moment El Duque was going to win the biggest postseason game for them and essentially save their season? I doubt it.
And to take this to the current team, you go back, if the Yankees had won last year, you can say what you want about Gerrit Cole and the stars they had on that team. Cortez would have been the linchpin of that team when you think about what he did, and he's continuing into this year as well.
Two guys for me. Cortez would be number one, and then Trevino. You get a guy who you picked up in the final week of spring training. He wins a platinum glove, and then the two of them combined at the All-Star game, and I'm sure you saw this, but to get inside a pitcher and catcher relationship and hear what they were going to throw to All-Stars, yeah, those two guys had phenomenal seasons, but that's a great parallel by you. Had the Yankees won it, you would have been saying those two guys performed above what you would expect.
The thing that stands out for me about the 1998 Yankees team was, I think, and I'm pretty sure you have this stat in the book, they lost one game from the 8th inning on in which they had a lead.
I think it was
about closing the door.
I think it was 93-1, and Mariano was obviously key, but Graham Lloyd was a lefty specialist. Mike Stanton is interesting, Jim, because if you look at his numbers on the year, he had an ERA of about 6. But if you dig inside those numbers, there were a handful of games where he just got walloped. So in 55 games, his ERA was about a 2. Because I remember I said to him when I interviewed him, I said, Mike, how did you have almost a 6 ERA on that team? I remember Torre saying how valuable you were. And to Mike's credit, he said, look inside the numbers. He said, I had about 6 outings where I gave up 5 runs in a third of an inning, and then my ERA never came back to life. But yeah, they shut you down. They got a lead, and the game was over.
We've talked about the role players on the team, and it's important to get them to buy into what you're doing. How much of a factor was Torre in that versus the core players of that group, Jack, to get those guys to buy in?
The words that I always used to describe Torre as a manager were soothing and stoic. I think he had instant respect when the Yankees hired him because of what he had accomplished on the field. And I think players respected Joe so that when he did raise his voice, it resonated with them. He didn't have to do it often, but there were times where he was trying to get a message across. He did it early in this season when they got off to that slow start on the West Coast. He had dinner by himself out in Seattle one night and said, I got to talk to these guys about this. This is not the way I want this team to play. So I think Torre was he was the perfect manager for that 98 team.
And it was a remarkable team. We're talking with Jack Curry this morning here at 105.5 WDHA, the new book on the 1998 Yankees. Let's come fast forward to this year. Your thoughts on Anthony Volpe?
I enjoy watching a young player make his way in the major leagues like Volpe, a Jersey kid. I talked to him in spring training, Jim, and the excitement that was coming out of his pores. And this was before he knew he was going to be the starter. I think he has acquitted himself well. You look at the batting average, it's not where he wants it to be, but I like his discipline and his selectivity as a hitter. His speed and his athleticism is vital, especially with the way the rules are now.
I was just going to mention that to you. Yeah,
exactly. He creates havoc on the bases. Now, the last 2 days, he's made errors. He had a bad hop come up on him, and he threw a ball away yesterday. But I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be the Yankee shortstop for years to come. And I've also been very impressed, Jim, and you do this for a living. You interview people. I've been impressed with the way a 21-year-old kid has handled himself in the New York media market. The other day, he was asked, he was kind of given an out. A writer said, did that ball come up on you? Was that a bad hop? And he said, good infielders don't get bad hops. That's on me. I got to make that play. And Bob Lorenz and I are listening in the pregame, postgame, and I turned to Bob and my eyes got wide because Bob will usually say to me, what do you want to talk about next? And I said, that. We're talking about that.
Let me ask you what you're listening to musically, because I know that's always a topic when you and I get together, Jack.
So I have to tell you about a concert. Have you ever been to Red Rocks?
I have not.
I went to Red Rocks last week. I like reggae.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Marley's 5 sons were performing at Red Rocks in Colorado. And I've always wanted to try and get there. So a college buddy of mine and I went to see Marley's 5 kids, and it was spiritual. I mean, it was such an awesome venue. And I got my dose of reggae. And it was probably about as close as you could get to seeing a Bob Marley concert. So I was pretty thrilled with that.
Excellent. The new book, again, the 1998 Yankees, the inside story of the greatest baseball team ever. And of course, you can see him on the Yes Network, working, covering Yankees. Jack Curry, as always, thanks for your time here on WDHA. Best of luck with the book.
Thanks, Jim. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.